Percy helped Annabeth to her feet, and they went to help Chiron. But he convinced them he'd be alright and told them to go help the campers.
"There are more serious injuries to attend to. I'll be fine," he said.
Luckily, there was a river in the woods, and only Percy could control water, so naturally, only he could put out the forest fires. While they combed the woods, they found Nico lying unconscious. One of the campers saw him summoning zombies from the underworld to fight off some Drachni women, and it apparently drained a lot of energy out of him. Percy trickled a canteen of nectar into Nico's mouth. He coughed a little and opened his eyes. He stared at all of them like he was trying to remember who they were.
"Daedalus?"
he croaked.
"Yes, my boy," the inventor said. "I made a very bad mistake, and I came to correct it." "Oh, and it just so happens I found Briareus here, running around in the maze while I was on my way here," Daedalus explained. "It seems he had the same idea to come help, but he got lost. And we both came to make amends." "Yay, I knew you'd come, Briareus," Tyson said happily. "I did not know at first," Briareus said, "but you reminded me of who I once was, young Cyclops. You are the hero." Tyson blushed, and Percy patted him on the back. "We knew that a long time ago," Percy said. "But Daedalus, the Titan army is still out there. Even without the string, they'll be back. They'll find a way sooner or later, with Kronos leading them." "You're right," he said. "As long as the Labyrinth is here, your enemies can use it. Which is why the Labyrinth cannot continue." "But you said the Labyrinth is tied to your life force," Annabeth said, "so as long as you're alive—" "Yes, my architect," Daedalus agreed. "When I die, the Labyrinth will die as well. And so before I go, I have a present for you, little sister." He produced a sleek silver laptop computer from his bag. It looked just like one of the laptops they'd seen in the workshop. On the lid was the blue delta symbol. "All my work is in here," he said. "It's all I could manage to save from the fire in the workshop. Notes on projects I never started, some of my favorite designs that I could not make time to develop over the last few millennia. And I did not dare review my work to the mortal world, but perhaps you will find it interesting." He gestured for Annabeth to take it, and she kept staring at it like it was solid gold. "You're giving me this?" she asked. "But this is priceless. This is worth... I don't even know how much." "Small compensation for the way I acted," Daedalus said. "You were right, Annabeth. Children of Athena should be wise, and I was not. And someday, you will be a much wiser and greater architect than I ever was. You can take my ideas and improve them. It's the least I can do before I pass on." "Wait, pass on?" Percy asked. "But you can't just kill yourself. That's wrong." Daedalus shook his head. "Not as wrong as hiding from my crimes for 2,000 years, he said. "Genius does not excuse evil, Percy. My time has come. I must face my punishment." "You won't get a fair trial," Annabeth said. "Minos is one of the judges of the dead." "I will take what comes," Daedalus said, "and trust in the justice of the underworld, such as it is. That is all we can do, isn't it?" He looked straight at Nico. "Yes, that's right," Nico said. "Will you take my soul for ransom, then?" Daedalus asked. "You could use it to reclaim your sister." "No," Nico said. "Bianca's where she wants to be. It took me this long to accept that. I will help you release your spirit." Daedalus smiled. "Well done, son of Hades. You are becoming very wise." Then he looked at Percy and said, "Oh, and one last favor for you, Percy Jackson. I cannot leave Mrs. O'Leary alone, and she has no desire to return to the underworld. Would you care for her?" He looked at the massive black hound.
He wasn't sure if his mom's apartment would allow dogs, especially dogs the size of a truck. But he just said, yes, of course I will.
Well then, I'm looking forward to searching for my precious son, Icarus, again. And Perdix, I must find him and tell him how sorry I am.
Annabeth rubbed tears out of her eyes. Nico took a step closer to Daedalus. For a second, Percy was afraid Nico would kill the old inventor on the spot, but he simply said, "Your time has long since come. Be released and rest." A smile of relief spread across Daedalus's face. He froze like a statue, and his flesh burned off his artificial body, revealing the machinery inside. Then, the statue burst into flames and disintegrated. Mrs. O'Leary howled in pain. Then the camp received one last tremor. It might have been possible that every major city across the country could feel it too, as the ancient labyrinth collapsed from the inside, never to be entered again. They could just hope the remains of the Titan strike force had been buried down there. Percy and Annabeth looked around at the carnage on the battlefield and the corpses of heroes that risked their lives to save their home. "Come on," Percy said. "We've got work to do." Now that the danger had passed, the Council of Cloven Elders wasn't going to wait another minute to hear about Grover's story. So while the other campers went to treat the wounded, Percy and his friends went to support Grover. Chiron, who was sadly too injured to walk, was there too. He would have to stay in his wheelchair for a few weeks until his legs were strong enough to take his weight. Silenus wanted to exile Grover immediately, but Chiron persuaded him to at least hear about the evidence first. So the quest group explained what happened in the Crystal Cavern and what happened to Pan, and described the weird sound Grover made which drove the Titan's army back underground. "It was panic," Juniper insisted. "Panic?" Percy asked. "Grover summoned the power of the Wild God." Chiron explained to him that during the first war with the Olympians and the Titans, Lord Pan let forth a horrible cry that scared away the enemies. He said it was a massive wave of fear, and that's what Grover did on the battlefield. He also mentioned it was where people get the word panic from. But Silenus still refused to believe anything that Grover and the quest group said.
"We must continue the search," he said, "and exile the traitor. Who would believe this ridiculous young satyr anyway?" "I would," said a familiar voice. Everyone turned to see Dionysus. "Miss me?" he asked no one in particular. "Well, I for one did not miss this place, even for a second. On top of that, I'm afraid I've arrived with bad news, my friends." He told them that some of the minor gods had recently went to join Kronos' army, including Morpheus, Janus, Hecate, Nemesis, and more. Then he commanded Grover to repeat his report. When Grover was done, Mr. D nodded. He agreed that the nymphs and spirits should stop relying on Pan to solve their problems and should start thinking for themselves. But Silenus still insisted on exiling Grover, and so did Marion and Linnaeus. But Chiron voted against it, and surprisingly, so did Mr. D. "Ha! 3-2,
Silenus said.
"Yes," said Mr. D, "but unfortunately for you, a god's vote counts twice. And since I voted against, we are tied."
"This is an outrage," Silenus shouted. "The council cannot stand at an impasse."
"Then let it be dissolved," Mr. D said. "I don't care."
Silenus angrily left the grove, with the other two satyrs right behind him. All the other nymphs and satyrs stood around, murmuring uncomfortably. "Don't worry," Grover told them. "We don't need a council to tell us what to do. We can figure it out for ourselves." He told them again the words of Pan, how they must save the wild a little at a time. Then he started dividing the satyrs into groups, which ones would go to the national parks, which ones would search the last wild places, and who would search all the big parks in the big cities. Annabeth looked at Percy. "Well," she said, "it looks like Grover's growing up pretty fast now." There were too many goodbyes that night. It was the first time Percy actually saw burial shrouds used on actual bodies, and it was not something he wanted to see again. Among the dead, Lee Fletcher from the Apollo cabin had been downed by a giant's club. Castor from the Dionysus cabin had been impaled on the battlefield. Percy now felt ashamed that he'd seen him around camp for 3 years and never even bothered to learn his name. He'd only been 17 years old. His twin brother, Pollux, the only other kid from the Dionysus cabin, tried to say a few words, but he just choked up and lit the shrouds. Within seconds, the fire sent sparks up into the stars. Later the next day, Percy found Tyson on the beach with Briareus. Tyson was giving Briareus directions to the Cyclops forges. He mentioned that Briareus wanted to help the other Cyclopes. He wanted to teach them ways they had forgotten and to show them how to make better armor and weapons. Also, Briareus said, "I don't want to be lonely anymore." "I doubt you'll be lonely down there," Percy said, a little wistfully, since he never had been to Poseidon's kingdom. "They're gonna keep you real busy down there."
"Busy sounds good," he said. "I only wish Tyson could come with me."
Tyson blushed.
"I need to stay here with my brother for now. You'll do fine, Briareus."
The 100-handed one shook Percy's hand.
"Goodbye for now, Percy Jackson," he said. "Something tells me we will meet again soon, and I look forward to fighting at your side."
He gave Tyson a big octopus hug.
"Thank you, Briareus," he said. "Thanks for everything."